saying, all those who cause sadness to Jews should suffer fear and death. Now, do you think that that bothers me? It doesn't. And here's why. In which case, it would seem to me that if all those who cause sadness to Jews should suffer fear and death, it seems to me that the main target of his own curse would be YHWY. Because what could cause greater sadness to Judaic people than to be enslaved to the Talmud and Kabbalistic pagan superstitions? Here's a newspaper article from the Jerusalem Post detailing how the religious party headed by Rabbi Ovadia Yosef are using Rabbi Kaduri to distribute his magic amulets to anyone who would promise to vote for Shas in the election. And anyone who received the amulet but failed to vote for Shas would incur the evil eye. This is no marginal phenomenon now. The leading Israeli politicians seek out Kaduri and Ovadia Yosef in order to curry favor with them. This is a copyright page from a book on amulets studied in one of the rabbinic seminaries in Jerusalem. I got it directly from the rabbinic seminary. It is entitled Shorshei Shemiyuth. Loosely translated, it means the source or root of the holy names of the Lord used in amulets. Do you see what's happening now? You know what's the root of much of the Western occult? It's the use of the name Yahweh in their services, in their rituals. They get us not to use the name, and then they make a magic formula around it and base their magic on it. This is one of the perverted uses that the rabbis reserve for the name of Yahweh, whose name can't be mentioned in the King James Bible, but is smattered all over this filthy book of pagan magic. This is what you find in the Western occult tradition, in alchemy, Rosicrucianism, and similar secret societies that have used the name Yahweh in their secret ceremonies. Now, this book was written in the late 1600s by Moshe Tascudo of Italy. There are later editions and commentary provided by the renowned Rabbi Elkanar of Tunis, who was known as a profound magician. This is who the Freemasons worship. This is where they got their whole magical orientation. This is the source of it. Yet you'll hear Pat Robertson condemn Freemasonry and put his arm around the Orthodox rabbis. What have we got again? The double mind. What does it say in James 1:8? The double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. This is why we can't keep our leaders on point. They're holding two contradictory ideas at the same time. Pat Robertson, by the way, is not my leader, but I'm thinking of some others who do the same thing and are just not as notorious. Now, this book is a 2-volume set. The first volume, which you see 680 pages, has over 1,000 entries for making various and sundry amulets for gaining wealth, attaining a state of invisibility, levitation, summoning demons, treasure hunting, gambling success, and casting the evil eye. Everything that your typical Babylonian soothsayer would have been working with 1,700 years ago is in here. Here's another page from the rabbi's amulet-making textbook, Shorshei Shemiyuth, complete with diagrams and all the magic formulas. And of course, there's the hexagram. You're looking at the belt of transmission for the diabolical paganism of ancient Egypt and Babylon, transmitted through Judaism, because this is the magic of the Pharaoh that opposed Moses and Aaron. That's how old it is. Transmitted through Judaism and eventually into the European-based secret societies like the Freemasons, the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and the Order of Skull and Bones, of which Bush and Carey are members, as well as Catholic and Protestant occult groups such as the Anglican British Secret Service of Queen Elizabeth I, and the various Kabbalistic groups that infiltrated the church in Renaissance Italy, and culminated in Pope Sixtus V placing an Egyptian obelisk in St. Peter's Square. Here is the root. If people who call themselves Christians want to believe that Judaism is a Bible-based elder brother of Christianity, then they ought to realize that this is the real face of Judaism at its most recondite and clandestine form. And if this is what they want to embrace out of fear of money and power, then they ought to at least leave Jesus Christ and St. Paul the Apostle out of it. Because the Christian martyrs all died at the hands of this diabolism, which today has such high prestige in the church world. Here's another page from that rabbinic book on making charms and amulets. This is idol worship. What's called in Hebrew avodah zarah. Another page. This is a very dangerous part of the amulet making process. See this right here? They're really warning them, don't do anything wrong here, because you're summoning the demons. And you don't summon them correctly and provide for your own protection, and you're dead. It will backfire on you. Why do they say that you shouldn't study the Kabbalah until you're 40 years old? The weird sigil on the left, can be fashioned only in conjunction with the incantation given on the right. That's why you see that pointing finger. Here's an ultra-Orthodox Judaic family that's not taking any chances. They've got every amulet you could possibly have up there on their wall. So idol worship in Judaism is simply not an issue for all those Protestant evangelists who crusade against the Catholics. In the end, and I regret to have to say this, I think it just comes down to pure cowardice and denial of the gifts every Christian received at Pentecost. I suppose some in their own defense will say, we just didn't know, Mr. Hoffman. Yeah? Well, now you know. I'm putting you under obligation tonight. That's my job. That's the mission that God's given to me. I went and talked a couple of years ago to the son of one of the Kennedy assassins. One of the 3 shooters is still alive. He's in federal prison. His son is a very, very, very important person in Hollywood. And I talked to him. And I put him under obligation. And later on, some friends of mine said, you know who you're in front of? Why don't you ask him for, a favor or this or that? What? I had a commission. I put him under obligation. And then another person told me, well, you probably failed because he didn't grant you an interview with his father in the prison. You haven't blown open the Kennedy assassination. It didn't bother me at all. God didn't tell me to go and blow open the Kennedy assassination. He told me to put this man under obligation. And that's what I did, and then my mission is done. Truth is an obligation. I started this talk out with the mystery of iniquity. How does the Bible define iniquity? Lawlessness. And in that passage in Thessalonians, what is followed afterwards? The statement that they have an insufficient love of the truth. The truth puts you under obligation. Knowledge can be a dangerous thing. That's why so many people love ignorance. I told you I would give you the 4 main sources of Judaic law. Now, I'm stopping at 4. I could give you 6 or 8 or 10, and they descend in order of priority. The Mishnah, the Gemara, the Mishnah Torah of Maimonides, the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo. That's the halakha. That's the law. And of course, the Kabbalah, there's 2 pillars that hold up Judaism. One is Talmud, one is Kabbalah. And so we often have apologists for Judaism say, well, Mr. Hoffman, a lot of what you're showing us about Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and the amulets, that comes from Kabbalah. There's a lot of rabbis who distance themselves from it. Well, that's simply not the case. Kabbalah is as much a part of Judaism as the Talmud is. But Judaism has something for everyone. The diabolic has something for everyone, leaves no one out. So Judaism, in the one pillar that supports the temple, has the Talmud. The Talmud is for the orderly, bureaucratic mentality. And the Kabbalah is for the freewheeling, hippie, artistic, New Age bohemians. Both are archetypes of human psychology. Both are human personalities. One type specializes in one. The other type specializes in the other. Both hold up the temple that is Judaism, without which it would collapse. So here we have Shulchan Aruch, the main body of post-Talmudic halakha, or law. Even a scholar may not read the texts of the Minim, the works of the Gentile philosophers. So Aristotle, Socrates. It's utterly forbidden to read them or peruse them, even sporadically, even to derive from them an ethical concept or inspiration. With regard to such texts, our sages declared that he who reads extraneous books has no share in the world to come. Again, you can say, Hoffman, I know rabbis who teach Aristotle. Right, because we're in the age of Judaic supremacy. All of these laws, or most of them, are subject to dispensations. The idea that the rabbis are superior to God, that's not subject to debate or dispensation. The idea that Jews alone are man is not subject to a dispensation. This is. Because we are in the era of Judaic supremacy. An era that we really have not seen in 2,000 years, although in individual nations like medieval Poland or Renaissance Italy, you did have a rise of Judaic power. And it's been covered up because they claim to be persecuted throughout time. And yet the book we published by Johann Andreas Eisenmenger was almost immediately banned in 1700 by the poor persecuted. They had no power, but they could stop a professor of Oriental literature at the University of Heidelberg from publishing a book, but they were powerless. The Sonsino edition of the Talmud has not been fully translated in certain passages, and some of the old censorship is still intact. Here you see the main passage from Sabbath 116a, that's Talmud, Babylonian Talmud Sabbath, Tractate 116a in the Sonsino edition, that says the blank spaces in the books of the Minim are to be burned. Minim means Christian in this context, so the passage says the books of Christians are to be burned. What about the blank spaces? It's a code word, and in the footnotes in the Sonsino edition, you read that blank spaces are the Gospels. So that was a code word during the time when the Catholic Church had forbidden the publication of the Talmud, which was in the Middle Ages. The Catholic Church allowed the publication of the Talmud in the 16th century as a result of the Kabbalistic infiltration of the Vatican by people like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola, who were part of the rabbinic chain, Erasmus was part of it, of this rabbinic chain of infiltration. So in the Middle Ages, they couldn't print in their book in case it was found. They always run on the assumption that the Goyium are going to get these texts. So they said blank spaces. It means burn. How do I know? This is an excerpt from one of the standard texts on the subject from R. Travers Herford's Christianity and Talmud and Midrash. And here he repeats the Talmud passage in question and then states that among the books of the Minim that are ordered to be burned, there is no doubt that the Gospels are included. No doubt the Gospels are included in the books of the Minim. This is from the great Israel Shahak's book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, which I recommend to you. Professor Emeritus at Hebrew University and a former inmate at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. And he gives an example of the New Testament being burned in Jerusalem under the auspices of the Yad Lachim, a Jewish religious organization subsidized by the Israeli Ministry of Religion. This is what we know about what they do. A lot of this denigration of the New Testament is done in secret. We don't find out about it. This is from the Jerusalem Post of December 2001. I have added the illustration. The text is the Jerusalem Post. I added the illustration. This news is very rarely reported outside the Israeli state. Again, the New Testament being burned with rabbinic approval at the Orat Jewish School in Bet Shemesh. I'd like to single out one of the really great Judaic people who have inspired me over the years. First and foremost is the previously mentioned Professor Shahak. He wrote the book Jewish History, and he's been called every vile name imaginable for having written that truthful and groundbreaking book, which I highly recommend to you as a starting point on this subject. Dr. Shahak was even called a neo-Nazi by the Zionists. He was an exemplary scholar and a human being of tremendous valor and idealism. He passed away a few years ago from diabetes. He's a great man. I'd like to remind my audience that Jesus Christ was a Jew. The first apostles were Jews. And this is what is meant when the Scripture declares in John, salvation is of the Jews. The knowledge I impart on this subject is meant to be affirmative of the humanity of Judaic people. I ask you to consider thinking in a new way on this subject, because a lot of the people who have gone before me on this, however honorable or courageous they may have done, they created a wagon rut and we haven't been able to get out of it. That's not what Jesus gave us the power to do, to have His Father's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We were not meant to be this weak and this powerless. So we need to look at this in a different way. Part of that is to understand that it was the Jew haters who wrote the Talmud. It was the Jew haters who blinded the Jews of the first century to their Messiah, and who continue to enslave them to a pagan, Babylonian, diabolical religion that is a modern continuation of the religion of the Pharisees. But it is far more evil than it was when it crucified the Messiah of Jesus Christ, because the wickedness and sin and wrong has just kept on piling up, and the Palestinians and other Arab civilians and we Christians have had a huge price to pay. Now let me tell you, if I truly hated Judaic people, I would leave them in their bondage. I would even congratulate them on it, as the leading so-called evangelists, along with the modern popes, have been doing. Yes, there are some harsh truths that I have articulated today, but I've done so in the same spirit that Jesus Christ did when He spoke boldly. Sometimes that kind of plain talk is just what is needed to make a light bulb go off in someone's head or a candle of truth ignite in their heart. But I want it made clear that I do what I do out of love for these people. The enemy is an ideology, not a people. All true Christians are true Jews. That's what it means to be a Christian. Let me tell you, the rabbis secretly encourage Jew haters, and this has been documented, because they preach to their Judaic followers that Gentiles have a permanent, irrational hatred for Judaics, the way Esau hated Jacob. And I conclude with a warning. The more the Judaic people are hated, they fall into that trap. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we have 15-20 minutes at least for questions.
Because what could cause greater sadness to Judaic people than to be enslaved to the Talmud and Kabbalistic pagan superstitions? Here's a newspaper article from the Jerusalem Post detailing how the religious party headed by Rabbi Ovadia Yosef are using Rabbi Kaduri to distribute his magic emblem. I got it directly from the rabbinic seminary. It is entitled Shorshei Shemiyuth. Loosely translated, it means the source or root of the holy names of the Lord used in amulets. Do you see what's happening now? You know what's the root of much of the Western occult? It's the use of the name Yahweh in their services, in their rituals. They get us not to use the name, and then they make a magic formula around it and base their magic on it. This is one of the perverted uses that the rabbis reserve for the name of Yahweh, whose name can't be mentioned in the King James Bible, but is smattered all over this filthy book of pagan magic. This is what you find in the Western occult tradition, in alchemy, Rosicrucianism, and similar secret amulets to anyone who would promise to vote for Shas in the election. And anyone who received the amulet but failed to vote for Shas would incur the evil eye. This is no marginal phenomenon now. The leading Israeli politicians seek out Kaduri and Ovadia Yosef in order to curry favor with them. This is a copyright page from a book on amulets studied in one of the rabbinic seminaries in Jerusalem, saying, all those who cause sadness to Jews should suffer fear and death. Now, do you think that that bothers me? It doesn't. And here's why. In which case, it would seem to me that if all those who cause sadness to Jews should suffer fear and death, it seems to me that the main target of his own curse would be Yitzhak Kaduri.